Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to the book Wormhole. Since I read a lot of 2021 releases last year, I thought it'd be a fun idea to not only single them out for my wrap-up videos, but also to talk about the hits and misses of the year. I thought the easiest way to do this video would be to rank every single title. This was not an easy task, as I quickly found out most of these titles were 5-star reads for me. Out of 17 titles, only 2 were personally disappointing to me, and I'll be starting there and working my way up. In 17th place, Yesterday is History by Kasoka Jackson. This book was highly disappointing. The writing didn't do it for me, the story felt related to me rather than actually shown, and I kept reading on waiting for the book to get to the good part, only for it to never come. Characters felt weak, and I didn't like Andre's chemistry with either love interest as well as his relationship with his parents and his best friend. In 16th place, only slightly better than Yesterday's History, How to Mars by David Ebenbach. Another disappointment. The synopsis of this book led me to believe it was going to be about something vastly different than it actually ended up being about, and it failed to stand out to me against other science fictions that have explored the same questions. And overall, the writing was kind of dry and not much happens in the book. In 15th, Local Star by Amy Ogden. What I loved about this book was not only the polyamory, but the unique family structures. For a book set in the future, I think it's only reasonable that the concept of nuclear family that we have now will definitely look different as family structures continue to evolve in our own time. However, I wish more time was spent exploring more of the world of this book. There is a glossary at the end to extrapolate on different concepts and slang mentioned in the book, but I find it tedious to pause reading and turn to the back of the book, as well as I think a lot of it could have been woven into the actual storyline. I know this is a novella, but I do read a lot of science fiction novellas and short stories that are able to include vast amounts of world building without interrupting the story. Also, there was one part where I'm pretty sure a certain action should have caused the character to die, but I'm no expert. This next book was one I was highly anticipating at the end of last year, so shockingly enough, it only ranked at spot 14. Victories Greater Than Death by Charlie Jane Anders. This book was cute and fun and adventurous. I think Anders really achieved what she set out to achieve with this book, but why it ranks so low is just compared to her other works, I don't like this book nearly as much as her adult fiction. I also felt that the beginning was a little clumsy. I know from watching interviews that she had written a lot more in the beginning that ended up being cut out, particularly depicting Tina's life on Earth. But I almost wish even less of it had actually made it into the final book, and that it started at the very moment her rescue beacon lights up, because the book takes a little bit to get its foot in. Once it does though, it's overall enjoyable, and I do want to continue reading on in the series. In 13th place, The Galaxy and the Ground Within by Becky Chambers. This is part of one of my favorite series by one of my favorite authors. I thought this book was a wonderful addition to the Wayfarer series and was a lovely read, but it didn't particularly stand out to me either. It's probably my least favorite book in the series, but only because I just really like the other books way more. This was still a 5-star read for me and well worth reading. These next two are pretty much neck and neck, taking places 12 and 11, Simultaneous Times 2.5 and Simultaneous Times 2. These are both wonderful anthologies composed of a variety of authors and a variety of takes on the genre of science fiction. Really tediously, I had to choose one book over the other, and why I put book 2 ahead of 2.5 is for a really trivial reason. I prefer print copies of books, which 2.5 is digital only, as well as 2 is a lot more long-time contributors to the companion podcast of the same name, whereas 2.5 has more new voices, which is great, but as a long-time listener, I knew the authors of 2 better. In 10th place, At First Contact by Janice L. Newman. This is a collection of 3 romance novellas that are all speculative in nature. Each story is really sweet and heavy on the feelings, and the worlds within each romance exists in are well developed. While I think each story has elements that relate to each other, the differences in genre is somewhat jarring, and I wonder if it would have been better presented as 3 separate novellas existing in a series rather than one book, but it is a nice 3-for-1 deal. In 9th place, Beetlejuice Demon by Jean-Paul L. Garnier. I think this was the only poetry book I read last year. This collection has one of my favorite of Garnier's poems, Last Contact, a poem about first contact with aliens ending in never being able to break the language barrier, and so alien and human life ends up parting ways. And there's just something so sad about that concept, but also such a different take on the concept of first contact. In 8th place, And That Was That by Bonnie Brady. As someone who was born after Roe vs. Wade, this memoir gave me such perspective on what it was really like before the legalization of abortion. One point that stood out to me was the absence of opposition right after legalization. For some reason, I pictured it would be similar to now, with protesters standing outside clinics, berating anyone who enters. Such was not the case though, and I think overall that reiterates the main purpose of this book. And that is to say how difficult obtaining safe abortions before legalization was, and that criminalized abortion doesn't stop abortion from happening. This memoir is not only really important, but also well articulated. And I think it's an important read for folks such as myself who have lived in a post-Roe vs. Wade world where we do have this privilege that sometimes I think we just take it for granted, and I think that's where a lot of the opposition has come from. In 7th place, Sienna by Gideon Marcus. Compared to Keitra, I like this book even more. Stakes were raised, relationships continue to develop and change, and overall I got a good sense of what to expect from the series moving forward. In 6th place, Galactic Hellcats by Marie Vibert. This book is as fun as the title suggests. I love the concept of a motorcycle gang in space, and the invention of their spacefaring bikes was really cool. I want one. There's also several well-developed worlds and cultures explored in this book, and I can only expect to see more of that in the installments to come in this series. In 5th place, Psalm for the Wild Builds by Becky Chambers. I feel like solarpunk is the perfect genre for Chambers to write in. I love the world she created for this novella with a really positive and green future. I love the idea of wild robots too. It's just such a neat and unique concept, and a world I really enjoyed being immersed in, as well as a very comforting and reassuring read. In 4th place, Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. This book is fantastically weird and frightening, and yet rooted in reality. I love the feeling of being hunted throughout the book, as well as being haunted by visions or ghosts. I thought Vern's albinism was well executed, given that it did leave her partially blind, and the themes explored in this book, such as religious trauma and religious abuse, power imbalances, grooming and unhealthy relationships, one of which being a same-sex relationship, were all super important, but also that there was a lot of good that comes Vern's way despite all of her suffering, and I really appreciate how this book ends. In 3rd place, Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. There's so many YA books that are dedicated to discussing how much it sucks to be a teen and how awkward of a stage of life it is, and this might be the first new adult book to represent that, but for being in your 20s. This book was just such a refreshing read because of that, since that post-college burnout is so real but is never talked about. The writing in this book is really pretty too. It's chock full of LGBT characters. I like the found family aspect of it, while also the main character Grace still has a relationship with both her parents. I also like seeing a plot about starting therapy for the first time in your late 20s, since I too got a late start there, but it also goes to show that it's never too late to get help. In 2nd place, Alex and AI's Guide to Love and Murder by Brent A. Harris. This was such a surprising read, an emotional roller coaster, and a thriller that was nearly impossible to put down. I don't know what else to say about this book that I haven't said already. But also, like, obviously it is one of my favorite books that came out last year. And in first place, The Echo Wife by Sarah Gailey. I genuinely think this is a modern classic and a fascinating feminist science fiction, with a lot to say about beauty standards, the expectations of women, bodily autonomy, particularly concerning reproduction, and abuse, and the enablers of abuse. I'm probably missing some themes there as well. It's just such an in-depth read. So that is my 17 2021 releases ranked. I did end up reading 3 more 2021 releases this month, but I'm omitting them from this list only because I'll be talking about them in greater detail in my monthly wrap-up. Let me know in the comments what your top 2021 release read was. Thanks for watching. Please support your local library and shop independent when you can, and until next time, please stay tuned.